the best of downtown from 7 to 8 a.m. on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. This is the best of downtown.
Well, hi, good morning. Welcome to the best of downtown on this Sunday, October 19. Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole with you, looking back at some of our favorite conversations from the past week. We'll hear from the great Bob Ryan, talk fantasy football with Dr. D, Craig Douglas, Chad Finn of the Boston Globe, Rich Levine of Comcast Sportsnet, and longtime Bangor Daily News editorial cartoonist George Danby, all on this morning's show. Let's kick things off with a conversation from early in the week. The quintessential American sports writer, Bob Ryan, nearly 50 years of covering not just Boston sports, but the international scene, 11 different Olympics along the way, and just a wonderful new book entitled Scribe, My Life in Sports. We talked about that with Bob Ryan earlier this week and began the conversation by talking about a guy he says might be the most interesting athlete he's covered, former Boston Celtics star Dave Cowens.
There's nobody like him that I ever encountered, a combination of a Hall of Fame player with an electrifying style who also had a personality that was very, an approach to life that was different than any other athlete. Though not what you would call an intellectual, he had an insatiable intellectual curiosity, and that shone through. And he also had a distinct code of personal ethics about how to play the game of basketball, that, as Mike Newland found out one night in 1976. And just everything about him was just different. For example, when they won the championship in 1974, and I asked him after the game, well, you've done it, you've won a championship, and finally, and how's it feel? And he said, for me, the fun was in the doing. This is just something for my portfolio of basketball experiences. That's a line that I've never had duplicated or replicated in the last 40 years. And what he meant, of course, was seriously true, that he was never a fan. When he was at Florida State for 4 years, he did not watch NBA basketball ever. He never saw anybody that he would meet in the NBA. When he first walked out of midcourt as a rookie to shake hands with the opposing center, be it Wilt Chamberlain or Lou Alcindor or Nate Thurmond or Willis Reed or whomever, it was the first time he had ever seen that person. And his attitude, as he explained, was, show me what you got. And that was Dave Cowens.
Absolutely. And then the other end of the spectrum, Larry Bird. And as you point out in the book, it would be a mistake for people to assume that Larry Bird really was the hick from French Lick, as he was often described.
That was just a little phrase that had a resonance to it. But when Larry came into the NBA, he was wary of the press. He was not comfortable with the media. He had not had to deal with it at Indiana State. He shunned it. They protected him because he was the star player, and that all made sense from their point of view and his. He learned as time went on that he actually enjoyed the banter. He enjoyed the media. He enjoyed manipulating the media to get to the fans. He became a master of it. And we learned that he was a very bright guy who, as I used to kid him, had simply evaded the American educational system for a significant period of his life. But he did, in fact, graduate from college. He did do a student teaching, and he was the smartest player that we ever saw. And as you see, that he became a successful coach and has been a highly successful executive, none of which surprised those of us who got to know him when he was in Boston.
Along the way, anytime you express your opinion, you're bound to have some people who don't agree with you, and it happened with Cowens. Happened famously on several occasions with Tommy Heinsohn and Red Auerbach. But with all of these guys, you made your peace with them, and the relationship grew tremendously as time went on with all of those guys.
Yeah, so with Tommy, it was a matter of coach versus writer, in which the coach didn't like the writer's viewpoint, which was often reflected the thoughts of the players. He thought the players had influenced me unduly, and one thing, and you have to remember that the coach's interests are not your interest, and there was some friction and it wasn't comfortable, but that was all then, and since 1978, we've been fine, and I have a Tom Heinsohn painting hanging in my living room, and I'm very fond of Tom Heinsohn, and I owe him a lot for taking time to help instruct me in the ways and wherefores of the NBA when we started out together as rookies, both my rookie year as a writer and his rookie year as a coach in 1969. And so, yeah, we had a rocky period, but it's over. And Red just liked to play the gruff father at times, and if you crossed him, then obviously he was going to react. But once again, I had nothing but the best relationship with Red for the last 30 years of his life, and it was a great joy to know him.
You've covered basketball so much, but as you write in the book, baseball is the sport that perhaps you love the most, and for your entire life, you've gone to games not simply as a spectator, but keeping score as well. That had to serve you tremendously well when it came time to put this book together and helping recall some of those great moments.
I had no trouble recalling any baseball game I've ever gone to since 1977, since I have scored every last one of them, and I have them in my 8 books that are on my shelf in my office. So, yes, baseball, I believe, is the best game. I call it the best game ever to spring from the mind of mortal man. There's simply more conversational fodder available in baseball than practically all the other 3 major sports put together. And there are just so many endlessly fascinating things about baseball, which isn't to say it's perfect. No game is perfect. Things are moving too slowly. They have to try to do something to speed it up, but nonetheless, it's still the greatest game ever. I love basketball. It was it launched and really enhanced my so-called career, and I played it, and that's the one I could play. But if you put the proverbial mystical gun to my head and pick one, it would be maybe by a 51-49 margin. I'd have to pick baseball.
We're talking with Bob Ryan. His book is entitled Scribe, My Life in Sports. You write an awful lot about the Olympics and the number of Olympics that you covered through the years and some of the incredible memories. Were you a bit surprised that you enjoyed covering the Olympics as much as you did?
Well, I always had an interest in them going far back as age 10 when I remember reading about the Olympics in Sports Illustrated in 1956, but I still didn't project myself into them. And when I got there, which was a byproduct of covering the Dream Team in '92 and getting a full flavor of what the Olympics were like when I wasn't covering basketball, men's and women's, I discovered how much I did like it. And more I became infatuated with it. Everything about it, the fact that there are all these sports out there with these great athletes that have nothing to do with our meat and potato sports of baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. The way that small countries react to winning a medal or a chance to win a medal. The interaction of these countries and their writers, and the fact that though we believe in no cheering in the press box, that we're the only country, maybe with Canada aside, that doesn't adhere to that. Everybody else that adheres to that. Everybody else thinks it's quite all right to cheer for your country. And to act a very partisan and parochial national way. It's all part of the flavor of it. I would have never known that the best traveling fans in the world in the Olympics are the Brazilians and the Swedes in the summer and the Norwegians in the winter. You get used to a lot of things that you had no idea about when you were younger, and it's a pleasant break to have the summer get away and do these things for 3 weeks and then come back and refresh yourself with the American sports, or to get away in the winter for 3 weeks and do the same thing. And I really loved 11 Olympics, and I really liked them. And
it was really the saga of a women's basketball team in particular that left a lasting impression on you.
The best, most interesting, and the most fascinating and most memorable of all the Olympic and World Championship basketball games I've covered, and that's a lot of them, the 1992 semifinal game in the women's Olympics between the CIS team of the broken up Soviet Empire versus the USA was the most poignant because of the political ramifications. These 12 young ladies from the CIS team had allegiance to no country. There was the Soviet Union was gone. They were fractured. There were like 5 different former Soviet republics plus the Russians that were on the team. They were going home to totally uncertain fates. They did not really have a country to play for. And you hear this phrase oftentimes. People will say, "Well, we did this for the 12 people in this room." Well, if there was one team ever that did it for the 12 people in that room and for nobody else, it was those 12 women. And the game they played to beat the favorite Americans, the game plan they adhered to, was so admired by the American commentators who covered it. And I found it to be the most fascinating game that I've ever covered in the international competition.
Your time on TV has also added greatly to your career, and I was loving reading the stories about the early days and the work of the great Dick Schaap, who really set the bar high for any writers who try to do television.
Well, it's a general consensus. What I'm about to say is such a universal opinion. I can assure you that there's no contradiction. Of all the great broadcasters, he was the best writer ever. Of all the great writers, he was the best broadcaster ever. He was the great combination of broadcaster and writer that we've ever known. A very, very fascinating and fun-loving and intelligent man. He used to kid that he was the only person that ever voted simultaneously for the Heisman and the Tony, and he was. He was in fact a permanent a drama critic for Channel 4 in New York. At the same time, he was covering sports and writing about sports. So there was nobody like him. John Saunders has done a tremendous job of filling in and making the show his own. And that is no offense to him, because we love John and he's indispensable to us. But we'll never see another Dick Schaap. At least there haven't been any lately.
We learn a lot about athletes in the book, but also we learn a lot about you, including the fact that you've got a secret, well, not so secret passion now, that in an alternate universe, you would love nothing better than to host your own radio show that would combine your two great loves of sports and music.
Right. The fantasy I've had for 25 years would be a show maybe once a week. And, obviously, it's Friday or Saturday night would be ideal, or Sunday night, any weekend night. Sunday night would be good. Yeah, it'd be a talk show. It would be sports and music. We would only do the topics of discussion. We'd have we'd talk sports or music, whichever you like, and we would play records in between. We would play maybe an album of the week or something, but we would do that. I would love that. I think that would be my ultimate fantasy.
Well, and reading it, I had to laugh, because when people ask me what kind of music I like, I always say, well, the good music. And you embrace a lot of different genres, from the great Buddy Rich to Sinatra to the Great American Songbook, all the way up to Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys' favorite song of all time.
Right, and I have a selection in there, what I think is the quintessential rock and roll song, the song that speaks to rock and roll as well as any one song that possibly could. And it may not be the one that a lot of people would think. But you want me to say it here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, to have it, the song would have to be about love. That could not possibly be about anything but love. It would have to have a tremendous beat, would have to have a tremendous sound, and it would be infectious. You couldn't get it out of your head. And that song is "Be My Baby" by the Ronettes. And Phil Spector is a cuckoo bird. He's a nutcase. He's incarcerated for life. But boy, was he good in that studio.
Well, and that was
50 years ago.
The song that inspired Brian Wilson. I listened to that thing endlessly out in his sandbox in California.
Yeah, well, I just think it's just perfect. It's the perfect rock and roll song.
Now, the other thing that I learned that I'm most impressed with from the book, I did not know about your background and your talents as a dancer.
Well, I grew up, I had access to lessons. We had a relative who owned the Trenton Conservatory of Music. In addition to getting piano lessons, I was able to get tap dancing and lessons, and I loved it. And then I proclaimed myself in this book to have been the best tap dancing first baseman in the North Trenton Little League. And I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. And
it can still do a mean soft shoe, right?
Yes, can do a soft shoe. I love dancing. I love the Stair Rogers. I love great tap dancers. I'm not the only one who thinks that the Rogers, that the Fred Astaire, Eleanor Powell tap dance to Begin to Begin in the Broadway Melody in 1940 is the greatest dancing moment in the history of American cinema. That is not a singular opinion. Anybody that cares should go look that up and see if they agree with me.
And that was Bob Ryan talking about his new book, Scribe, which is available at bookstores everywhere and also online, too. You can buy the ebook, the Kindle version. You can buy it also online at Amazon.com, among other sources, so I would recommend doing so. Just cracked it open myself this weekend and really enjoying it so far. So go check out Bob Ryan's new book, Scribe. Take our first break of the Best of Downtown here for this 19th day of October 2014. Hopefully you're enjoying a good homecoming weekend up at the University of Maine. And when we come back from this first break of the Best of Downtown, we'll talk with our good friend Dr. D, Craig Douglas, get some fantasy football advice for the full slate of games coming up later on this afternoon and evening. That and much more is still to come as we progress through the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Best of Downtown, a previously recorded edition of the show, talking fantasy football. Dr. D, Craig Douglas, checked in with Stack on Friday's show to get a look at who to have on your roster for this weekend's fantasy games, and we start with the look at the mailbag.
And start off with this question from Brandon from Hamden. He says, I need to start either Justin Forsett or Fred Jackson in my flex spot. Who do you prefer?
Justin Forsett has been, the back really most weeks ever since, the whole Ray Rice debacle at the beginning of the year. He's looked the most consistent. especially in the later weeks. Look, he's going against Atlanta this week. That's a game where I feel like they're going to be throwing a whole lot. I think Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco, especially after last week's performance, are going to be looking to air the ball out again. And, the fact that he's the best pass-catching back in that offense, I think really helps him. Not to mention he's played really well between the tackles. Last week, 14 carries, 111 yards. That's over 7 yards a carry. Huge average for him. Very, very good. And then week 5, a little slower. That was a week where they were kind of getting a little blown out. He didn't run the ball that much, 6 carries for 42 yards, but he did have 7 receptions for 55, which I think could be a similar stat line for him this week going into Atlanta, just knowing that, they're probably going to have to throw a lot. That being said, Fred Jackson has been, consistently average, I would say. He's a guy who's, kind of TD dependent stack. I just feel like, last week, 10 carries, 26 yards. Week 5, 10 carries, 49 yards. He did score in week 6, so his line looks pretty good. But again, he gets, 4 receptions, 7 receptions to add on top of that. So, a lot of people say he's got PPR value, but, at the same breath, Forsett has that same value. It's just a little less well known that he is also a pass-catching back. So I think you go with Forsett this week and you're going to be happy. I like his matchup a little bit more. Fred Jackson is going to go up against Minnesota. And again, he's split with C.J. Spiller when Forsett's splitting with Bernard Pierce. Yeah, so, that's why I think Forsett's your guy this week.
Perfect. Yeah, I really enjoy Forsett, too. He's on one of my rosters, and I'm definitely starting him without any pause there. So let's go to our next question. It's from Harry, who's from Orono. He's got a league set up with a wide receiver 3 position and needs some help there. Should he start Pierre Garçon or Sammy Watkins?
Man, Kirk Cousins has been so frustrating this year for Garçon. It's just week 3, like 16 targets, 11 catches, just looked like the guy that you probably drafted, in the 4th or 5th round. And then since then, week 4, 2 catches, 17 yards, no touchdowns. Week 5, 2 catches, 23 yards, no touchdowns. Last week, 4 catches for 31 yards, but luckily saved most fantasy weeks with a touchdown. Other than that, it would have been another, miserable week fantasy-wise for him. Going to be playing a Tennessee team, which, is a positive matchup, I think, for him. But, just the inept play by Kirk Cousins is really hurting that team. He clearly, favors Deshaun Jackson over Garçon for some reason. And, Sammy Watkins has been hit or miss this season, fantasy-wise, but really, last week we knew he was going to be shadowed by Revis. They kind of told us that going into the week. So I actually had someone, message me, and I told them, hey, this is the week you want to bench this guy. Orton's just going to look the other way. They're going to have Revis on him. He's a young kid. He still, got you, about 30 yards, but it wasn't, the week he had before where he had basically 12 targets, 7 catches for 87 yards. I like him playing against Minnesota this week. I think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And, he is the guy there. Like, it's not, Wood. It's Watkins. And Orton's looked to air the ball out as well as he can. So I'm going to go with Watkins this week.
Our final question from the mailbag with Dr. D. Craig Douglas here on Downtown is from Kevin from Bangor. He says, I'm very weak at wide receiver, and now I just lost Victor Cruz for the season. I just got offered a deal of Mike Wallace and Eric Decker for Alfred Morris. I also have Arian Foster and Ben Tate as my other backs. Is this a deal that you would do?
I'll go through my opinion real quick, but Stack, what do you think? If this was sent to you, would you do it?
Well, if you have Ben Tate and Arian Foster, I'd probably do it. I mean, if they have a better wide receiver, I might try for them first and foremost for Alfred Morris, but I have no problem doing it.
Yeah, that's my opinion too. I think that, it would be great to have Alfred Morris probably, in there as like a flex spot if you have it. But if it's a league where you're just starting 2 running backs and then, 2 or 3 wide receivers, I think you definitely do this deal. Just knowing that both Wallace and Decker aren't, huge, fantasy guys, but they're very, very consistent. Mike Wallace has actually scored every single week except 1 week this year, which is, a huge, huge plus and kind of a sigh of relief. Even though he has yet to have a 100-yard game, he's still consistently getting you double-digit fantasy points every single week. So that's a huge plus. Eric Decker, 24 catches, 323 yards, 3 TDs on the season. But at the same time, he's really only played 4 games. They've had a bye week. He had that 1 week where he was injured. Averaging just under 10 targets a game. I think that, it's clear that Geno is using him as his only option in the passing game. So I think both those guys are consistent. Both guys can be, put in your lineup, help you on bye weeks. Depth is always king, especially going into the playoff system here shortly. So, yeah, I think you do the deal.
And Eric Decker, as I know, I have him on one of my teams, that he's getting a lot of targets, as you mentioned. So if you got the opportunity, why not acquire him, especially when he seems healthy? He was probable going into last night's contest, so that's always a good sign.
Absolutely.
Well, Craig, I see here in the Downtown League you're taking on Ryan Waning. He's already put up 10.5 points, and you're projected to beat him by around 20 or so hopefully you can take care of business and get it in the win column once again.
I know. Ryan and I always have great matchups, so I'm sure it will be nothing short of spectacular. So we'll be looking forward to seeing the outcome of that.
Well, best of luck this weekend, and we'll check in with you next Friday for some more fantasy football advice.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Dr. D, Craig Douglas, with some fantasy football advice for this full slate of games coming up this afternoon and evening. The Patriots are already in the books from this last Thursday, and if you had Shane Vereen, you're looking in a very good position. But if you're not, you could use a little tinkering. Maybe you face Shane Vereen and the Patriots offense. So some nice fantasy advice from Dr. D moving forward. If you ever have a question for the doctor, you can also post that right to our Facebook page. It's Downtown with Rich Kimball. We'll pass that along to Craig, and we'll have it answered in next week's mailbag. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here for the 19th day of October 2014. We'll come back after another break approaching here, and when we do, we'll talk to our good friend Chad Finn of the Boston Globe. He'll talk about the victory of the New England Patriots on Thursday night, and also what we can expect from the Boston Red Sox this offseason as well. That and much more still to come here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket in the Best of Downtown.
Best of Downtown on your Sunday morning. 19th day of October. This date in history, Chief Justice John Jay was sworn in as the first Chief Justice of the United States. This date in 1789. Among the highlights from this day in history, Boston Red Sox. This day in 1986, it was looking so good. I remembered well. Won Game 2 of the World Series 9-3 against the New York Mets at Shea Stadium back in 86.
I don't recall how that ended.
I wish I also did not recall. Speaking of Boston, we had a chance to talk Boston sports and a little bit of sports media on Friday with our friend, Boston Globe writer and proud University of Maine alum, Chad Finn of the Globe.
Win is a win, and you look back last year, Rich, a win was a loss, or a loss was a loss, I guess. It was Week 7. They lost on the Nick Folk field goal down there. It was their first game without Gerard Mayo after he suffered a season-ending injury last year at this point as well. The Jets ran the ball well then. The main difference, there's a lot of parallels. The main difference was that this time they actually held on and won the game. And judging by Bill Belichick's reaction afterward, I think a lot of fans were probably frustrated saying, we only beat this team by 2 points. They've lost 6 in a row. But Belichick was pretty happy to have that win in the bag, and Brady was in a good mood afterwards. And I tend to think that they probably have more respect for the Jets and for the game plans Rex Ryan comes up with against the Patriots than probably Patriots fans do.
So what do we know about this team after 7 games?
A few things. Tom Brady's not finished. They're going to have to find somebody in the middle of that run defense, just like they had to do last year when Mayo got hurt. They really there's a gap there that Chris Ivory exploited last night time and time again. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's somebody on this roster right now, because you're asking Dante Hightower and Jamie Collins to play out of position a little bit, to do things that maybe they're not quite capable of, and it takes them out of their comfort zone too. I'm a little surprised. I was at the time, and I am in retrospect, that they don't have more depth at linebacker, and I wonder if that's something that could come back and haunt them. But really, all we really know about the Patriots right now is that their quarterback's still pretty good, their coach is pretty good, and they're going to win the AFC East again. And all the things that are really important to us aren't going to be settled until they get into the playoffs.
Absolutely. I'm very surprised, and I just hadn't thought about it until you wrote about it today, that last night was the first time the team of Jim Nantz and Phil Simms has been able to broadcast a Patriots game this year.
Yeah, they've been doing that Thursday night thing. CBS has the 1-year deal, and the NFL has an option on a second year, so that CBS really wants it to go well. They want to retain this. For all the horrible games that they've had, and they had 3 brutal blowouts right out of the gate, the ratings are still huge. Whether or not the league, whether or not the players and the coaches like playing on Thursday, the fact is that we're tuning in, and the league is making money, so it's not going anywhere. So CBS is really pumping this up this year, and one of their ways of doing that was putting their number one broadcast team on it, Nantz and Simms, and giving it sort of a big game feel, and sort of what happens on Sunday nights on NBC and then on Monday Night Football, and with not a lot of luck in terms of having good games, they finally got one last night. But they're really because they haven't been here for many Sunday games because of this Thursday situation. It's a little bit surprising. I talked to Nantz yesterday, and he said he's done 70-something Patriots games in the last 11 years, including the playoffs. So it is a bit strange to have them not see Brady and Belichick and the Patriots until Week 7, but they'll see them a lot again, and of course in the postseason, Nantz and Simms will be very involved with the Patriots coverage.
Chad Finn of the Boston Globe with us here on Downtown, staying on the sports media beat, and I think very good news for Red Sox fans that NESN got a deal done with Don Orsillo. Yeah,
they picked up his option late in the season and kind of kept it on the hush-hush. I had a line about it today. I've known about it for a little while, but they were really not getting along all that well toward the end of the season. NESN felt like maybe he wasn't respectful enough to them, and they certainly weren't respectful enough to him. They kind of jerked him around on this contract when you have a guy here who's worked about 30 different color analysts the last couple of years when Remy's been in and out, a guy who's been a really company guy who's become one of the better baseball broadcasters in the country. He wasn't on the TBS broadcast this year because they cut their announcer teams in half in the postseason because they didn't have the NL anymore. They just had the AL, but he's a guy who got national prominence from doing that for 5 or 6 years, and yet NESN never really seemed to appreciate him. They kind of left him hanging a little bit in terms of this last year of his contract. So it's good to know that they picked it up, and from what I hear, they're going to talk to him about a long-term deal this offseason. But I feel like they could have handled it much more gracefully, and it should have been a no-brainer to pick it up at the beginning of the season, to be honest.
Well, I miss him on the national broadcast. It's been tough at times, and I like Ernie Johnson in other sports, but this has been a struggle.
Yeah, he's miscast. I mean, he's great in the studio with Barkley and Kenny Smith, and you know he has a sense of humor because he has it there in that role of traffic cop on the NBA broadcast. But he's play-by-play, he just doesn't get a lot of baseball reps over the course of the year, and I think that shows now. And it doesn't help that he's paired with Cal Ripken, who's I've liked him in the studio before too, but the pace of the in-game play-by-play just doesn't suit him. He seems like almost reluctant to talk. And the other analyst is Ron Darling, who's excellent, but you can tell he's trying to pick up the slack because Ripken never says anything. So it's kind of a weird trio there. And I think I'm probably with a lot of Red Sox fans who, if I had my druthers, put Orsillo back in there and Eck's still with him. Have Eck in the booth with Orsillo like we've had here a few times. That would be about as good as it gets, and we already know they have chemistry together. But for this year, anyway, that's not the situation because only Eck and not Orsillo is working for TBS this time around.
And that was Chad Finn of the Boston Globe talking about the Patriots' victory over the Jets on Thursday Night Football and some more on the Boston sports scene. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here, a previously recorded edition of the program. Thanks again for joining us here on this early parts of your Sunday morning. We'll take another break on the show. When we come back, we'll check in with another Boston insider, our good friend from Comcast Sportsnet New England, the always funny, always popular Rich Levine, as he'll join us after the break. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
It's Best of Downtown on a Sunday morning, 19th day of October. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole here on 92.9 The Ticket.
Oh, life is bigger. It's bigger than you are not me.
Birthday list today includes a terrific actor, John Lithgow, celebrating his 69th birthday today. Also turning 69, country singer Jeannie C. Riley had a big crossover hit back in 1968. With the Harper Valley PTA among those celebrating birthdays today on the 19th day of October. If it's your birthday today, well, goodness, a happy one to you. Stack, you've had yours.
Yeah, mine was around last month, almost a month from today, actually.
I remember it well. It was big quarter century. It's a big one.
Yeah, not really to me. I had a flat tire, so it was a good time.
Sorry to hear that. On Downtown, we remind you, too, big football game tonight on The Ticket. Peyton Manning, Denver Broncos, taking on those San Francisco 49ers of Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, and Peyton Manning, I think, needs 3 touchdowns to pass Brett Favre for the most all-time by a quarterback.
On Downtown earlier this week, we caught up with our friend Rich Levine, covers a little of everything in the Boston sports scene for Comcast Sportsnet New England. We started out by talking a little Celtics and the impressive play early on of new Celtic Evan Turner.
Yeah, I think that he's, I guess excited in what way? I think I envision him as like the next, this generation's Ricky Davis, maybe, for better or worse. I think that he is a guy that, on a team that doesn't have championship expectations, that is sort of, I don't want to say going through the motions, but, just like kind of an all-star man. I think he's a guy that can put up a lot of impressive numbers on a team like that. I mean, I think certainly if Jeff Green goes down for any a significant amount of time, I think otherwise it might be a little tough with the way the Celtics backcourt is set up. But if Evan Turner can get minutes, if Evan Turner plays 35 minutes a game in the NBA, he is going to average, maybe close to 20 points and maybe like 6 and 6. Like, he's a versatile player. I think his head isn't always quite there, which is why we've seen him moved around despite being a number 2 pick and having all that talent. But I think he's going to have a couple of really big nights. I don't know if he's necessarily part of the future. If when the day comes where hopefully we see the Celtics back in contention, I don't know if we're still going to see Evan Turner, wearing green. But for now, I think he's one of those guys who if you like basketball, and I think that's one thing that's really cool about this season. I think is that the tanking talk is dead. There's no one like Wiggins or Embiid or Jabari that are just waiting at the end. I don't think that, and especially after we went through all that last year and then have the Celtics land the 6th pick or whatever it was, I think that all the tanking talk is done. So in a way, you can just sit back and like you said, they're not going to contend this year, but they have a coach that the players seem to be behind. Got a couple talented guys, and you can just sit back and hopefully just enjoy some good basketball and hope that they keep moving in the right direction.
Now, the Celtics will be part of this experiment to try shaving 4 minutes of time off the game. Do they get to pick the 4 minutes that they can get rid of?
that would be nice, right? you get to go. Yeah, everyone has to go into a meeting after the game,
exactly,
and shave off the points. Yeah, I guess. I don't know if that's real or if it's just like all these teams are just all these leagues competing for headlines and buzz and whatever it is. I mean, people seem to think that Silver is somewhat serious about looking at this. I don't necessarily know if making 44-minute games is the issue, and I'd maybe kill a few timeouts, maybe, or kill a few commercials during the games. And like someone said, I don't really think that. Well, certainly not preseason, but regular season basketball. Like if you turn on the Celtics on an average night, I don't know if it's like a Red Sox Yankees game where you're pulling out your hair, by the end, just waiting for it to end. It's like it's the nationally televised games on the Sunday afternoon. Certainly the playoff games where they're going to commercials in the last minute of a game can take 10 minutes. But I don't know. For me, I appreciate the Silver's willingness to sort of experiment with anything and everything. I think that the worst thing that can happen is when these leagues grow stale and just rest on their laurels and keep cashing the checks. I think it's cool that he's sitting in his office and he's like, okay, how can we make this game better? How can we make it friendlier for the fans? How can we make it a little bit more fast-paced and keep with the time? So that's cool. Like, I don't necessarily know if 44-minute games is the answer, but I think it's cool to see him just doing something.
Rich Levine of Comcast Sportsnet New England talking about the Boston Celtics and also the NBA as we're getting closer and closer to that season. And Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket is your home for the Boston Celtics and basketball coverage throughout the season in this 2014-15 season, which will begin in the month of November. You're listening to the best of downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Speaking of this station, 92.9 is your home this afternoon for the NFL coverage that you would want and need. No Patriots action today, but a full slate of games and looking forward to it, including Sunday night's affair. San Francisco goes to the Mile High City to take on the Broncos. Peyton Manning also has a chance to make history in the game later on this evening, as he needs just a couple of touchdowns to pass Brett Favre for the most all time. So be sure to keep the dial locked right here to 92.9 FM and Sports Radio The Ticket. We'll take another break, change things up from the sports here on the Best of Downtown, and when we come back, we'll talk with Bangor Daily News cartoonist George Danby, who talked with Rich earlier in the week about his new book that's coming out. That and much more is still to come here on the Best of Downtown, a previously recorded edition here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Hey, thanks for getting up early on your Sunday morning Best of Downtown. I wish I could say Stack and I did the same, but sadly, this is a previously recorded edition of Downtown on 92.9 The Ticket.
Well, I started out.
Though I'm probably up.
I'm probably not.
You need to be ready, Stack, because later this morning, a little downtown touch football.
Yeah, I'll roll out of bed. I know we're supposed to meet up at 11 o'clock, so I will be there probably just before then.
The sound of my voice tomorrow, if I do play in this game, will be somewhat different because I'll be rubbing Ben Gay everywhere. Well,
Same here, except
everywhere.
I'll just be excruciating in pain all over. Just not fun.
Hey, George Danby, boy, he's been doing the cartoons for the Bangor Daily News for 4 decades now. Started back in high school, syndicated all around the country, some of the biggest papers in the nation. And finally, they have put together a collection of some of George's best work. Our friends at Island Port Press have published The Essential Danby. We had a chance to catch up with George this week, talk about the book and how he got the idea for it.
Actually, I've been talking about putting out a collection for quite a few years. Probably the only political cartoonist that hasn't put out a collection. Something I was going to get to at meeting the daily deadline never happened. A couple of years ago, I did approach Island Port Press. They're doing a really good job in the state, independent seller. They were very interested, and we sat down, and slowly it evolved. And it dawned on them that this year, 2014, unbelievable. I've been doing it for 40 years. Not full-time, but my first cartoon was printed in 1974 when I was in high school.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, we were in high school together. I was a little bit younger, not much. But I remember as a high school student, and probably even before that, you've always had that love. What makes someone take the love and the talent and translate it into this pretty unique position that not that many people do around the nation?
It's true. I always had the drawing ability. Was thinking of I can draw. I could be a serious painter, but was really interested in comic strips at an early age. But also, as you know, in the 70s, politics, President Nixon in office. After Johnson, Nixon, the caricature was at its peak, probably. So there was, a lot of stuff that had to do with, politics was very, at its peak. Journalism, Bernstein, Woodward. So I combined the two. I had a number of art teachers that said, hey, politics, you have the satire, and, you can draw. And I started paying more attention to political caricature.
And that was really the golden age, I would say, the 60s and early 70s of political cartoons. I mean, some of the greats were at their peak at that time.
Oh, definitely. So from there, I put it together, and I ended up getting my first cartoon published, which happened to be in the Providence Journal-Bulletin. They were looking for ideas. Someone had seen some ad. A relative was visiting in Rhode Island, brought it back. I was already actually doing some drawings, sent them along. They decided to publish them, and that gave me enough confidence to come over to the news. And then I started publishing there.
And you've been with the Bangor Daily for all these years, but your work is syndicated all around the country, and the biggest papers in the nation have run your work.
Well, that's nice. Yeah. It's I actually after school I left, I went freelance in New York and ended up being the political cartoonist at the New Haven Register in Connecticut, and then moved and was working in Providence, strangely enough, as a full-time cartoonist 10 years later. And then slowly came back to Maine and with the syndication, so it's been a really good fit.
Now, when elections roll around, do you look at them as a cartoonist and say either, oh man, this guy is going to be great because there's so much humor to mine, or do you look at their physical appearance and say, this would be a really fun person to draw for the next 4 years?
Yeah, that definitely, everybody's caricaturable, but certainly some people are more fun than others. And it's an evolution, too. The first cartoons you draw of someone that takes office, whether it's the governor or president, look remarkably different than at the end. Especially since you get a chance to draw them, it depends. What early 8 years of Reagan, the early caricatures look much different. Same with right now, Paul LePage. The caricature is much different than the first few I drew in 2010.
We're talking with George Danby of the Bangor Daily News, The Essential Danby, being published by Islandport Press, and a big book launch is coming up this Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Bangor Public Library, 145 Harlow Street in Bangor, which is also the day that the book comes out. Who are some of your favorites to draw over the years?
It's hard to say, really. It's been so many. Early on, when I was in high school, it was really fun to draw James Longley, and he really liked seeing himself as a cartoon character. So he didn't really mind if you were criticizing him. He just liked he would ask for the originals, that's kind of interesting. Definitely, Paul LePage has been fun the last few years. In terms of nationally, Reagan was pretty decent to draw. It's all been, there all had been some fun with each politician or candidate, statewide or nationally.
Now, you said Longley enjoyed your work. Have you had people who got in touch with you and either said they didn't like the content or they didn't like the way you drew them?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. No, didn't hesitate to call to let us know that they were unhappy. John Baldacci was never thrilled with the caricature. He felt I didn't give him enough hair.
I don't think it was you that did that to him.
It's happened. There's been other ones that Joe Brennan never was actually thrilled with the cartoon. Angus King enjoyed seeing himself in print, and if I was critical, he would still like it, and he actually did the introduction for the book, which was very nice of him to take the time.
And that was Bangor Daily News cartoonist George Danby talking about his new book of editorial cartoons and the work he's done for the Bangor Daily News that's run nationally as well. So go out and pick that book up as well. And thanks again to George for his time earlier on this week on Downtown with Rich Kimball. We'll take our final break here on the program. When we come back, we'll wrap up this show in a nice little bow, and we'll also preview what's to come for the next 5 editions of Downtown with Rich Kimball. So stay right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. The best of Downtown returns after this.
Where's time go? Ready to wrap up the best of Downtown for your Sunday morning. Going to form our love train and make our way right out the door here. Thanks for being with us this morning. Thanks to everybody on the show. The quintessential American sports writer, Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe, Chad Finn of the Globe, Dr. D, Craig Douglas, Rich Levine, Comcast Sportsnet New England, and the longtime editorial cartoonist of the Bangor Daily News, George Danby. Don't forget, tonight football, Denver and San Francisco on the ticket. Dale Duff, Clem Labrie doing their thing tomorrow morning at 6, and we've got a live Downtown Monday afternoon, getting you ready for the World Series. How about a preview from Gary Thorne, who will be doing the international broadcast of the series this year for the 12th time. Plus, Jack Cosgrove, Maine football coach, movie reviews with Alan Adams of the Maine Edge. Latest on the Bruins as well. We'll check the national polls and college football, too. And Steve McKay's weather for the week. Downtown tomorrow afternoon at 4 here on The Ticket. Have a terrific Sunday. Thanks for being with us this morning. You're listening to Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Downtown, when you've got worries, all the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know. Downtown, just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger